the Bible, we are told that God is the potter and that we are the clay. Because of this, we believe that God molds, shapes, and designs us. The question for us is, what is God designing me to be? What is He shaping me for?
Morning, welcome to Westgate. My name is Steve Fisher. I am the student ministries pastor here, and I get to speak with you this morning as we kick off our new series. And so this morning, as I'm watching that video, I'm kind of reliving my senior year of high school. I took a ceramics class because I loved art so much. That's kind of a lie. I was hoping it was an easy A so I could balance out my English grade. But I took ceramics nevertheless and really kind of fell in love with it. And I took a couple of classes. And so what you watch there as the potter throws the clay down into the wheel and pushes on it and centers it and then starts to make the hole in the clay and then to pinch it and pull it up to get just the right size of pot or dish or whatever they're making. Like, that looked so easy. That is so hard. Because if you've ever, maybe anybody ever thrown clay on a wheel? A couple of you? If you've ever had to do it on the kick wheel, kind of the old one where you're doing one of these numbers, and your hands, they have to stay steady as you're kind of raising that clay up. And so you're kicking, and if you kick too fast, you end up digging your fingers into the clay. You kick too slow, and you mess it up again. And so it takes this tremendous amount of precision and skill and ability to make these pots, these dishes on a wheel like you've just seen. And so you can see some of them scattered throughout the stage. All through the Bible, we find this metaphor being used for God and us, and that God is the potter and that we are the clay. You see in the Old Testament, this is literally verbatim what God says. In Jeremiah 18, he tells his people, "You are like clay in the potter's hand, and I am the potter." In Isaiah, the people respond to God by saying, "We are the clay, and you are the potter. We are the works of your hand." And so, I fully believe that God molds us and shapes us, designs us, creates us, right? He is sovereign, meaning he has all the power as he is the potter to shape and create us. But if you will, there's also another side to that. That yes, God shapes us, creates us, molds us, that it is in his will. But there's also the fact that once he creates us or shapes us, or kind of maybe even as he does, he has designed for each of us a purpose. And then depending on how faithful we are to following that purpose really makes a big difference. Maybe like you, I am having a Super Bowl party today. I'm having people over. I'm going to make tacos. I already started last night, right? And so we're going to have all the stuff that, tacos have, and we're going to have salsa and guacamole. And can you imagine for a second, I pour all of my salsa into this jar and set it out for people to dip their chips in. They may make a new chip for this, but doubtful, right? We would say, right, that there's a problem, right? That this is the wrong piece of pottery to put, right, salsa in. That's not the function. It's not what it was designed for. First service, I was kind of trying to figure out what this is designed for. I still have no idea, so you can come up afterwards and tell me. But, right, you would pick something different to actually hold that so that it would function properly. And what I'd say as we go through this series of becoming, right, God's plan and our faithfulness, God lets us play a part in his plan for us. And we have the ability to be faithful to what he has created and designed us to be. Think of it, there's a parable in the New Testament, and most of you will know this or remember this, and Jesus is telling the people, and he says there's this master that goes away, and he has several servants, and he gives each one of them a certain amount of money. Do you remember this story, right? To one 10, one 5, and to another 1. And as he leaves, he's away for some time, and each servant has the ability, the choice to do what they want with what they were given. And so as they go, the one puts it into a bank account and the other one invests it, right? And some of them end up making more money. They do something with what they were given. And so when the master comes back and the master says, okay, what have you done? They come and they show him, hey, you gave me this much. Look what I've done with this. Do you remember what the master responds? This is Matthew 25:21. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. God gives us this ability, these giftings. He creates us into something, and then we have the ability to join with him to use what we have become or what we are becoming for him. Or we do have the ability, if you remember the story, remember the one guy takes it, buries it right in the ground out of fear. He does nothing with it. And he gets scolded, chastised. He gets thrown out because he did nothing with what the master gave him. And so as we talk about this idea of becoming this kind of twofold, that it is God's plan, but then it is also our faithfulness. So we're going to look at the story of Joseph in the Bible. And so we're going to go over the next 4 weeks. You're going to hear a couple of the other pastors here at Westgate speak. And so as I was studying it, as I'm kind of reading over it, it really struck me that this whole idea, this pottery, this us being faithful, it struck me that I have the ability, you have the ability, because of God's graciousness and why he's decided to do this, that he gives you the ability to be part of his work. He doesn't, on the other hand, it doesn't work when we go, hey, God, be a part of my work, right? God's design is that he designs us and then he brings us into that. You're going to see this in the story of Joseph. I would say that you can see that even in your own life, that God has designed you, created you with purpose, and that he is letting you be a part of that. One scholar wrote, as he talked about the story of Joseph, he said this: the story of Joseph makes God, not Joseph, the hero. It's not a tale of human success, but of divine sovereignty. It really struck out to me as I was reading it, just that this is not a tale of human success, but of divine sovereignty. So we're going to look at Joseph this morning. Maybe some of you know the story, super familiar. Maybe some of you don't know who this is, and so we're going to walk through this. And we first find Joseph's name mentioned in the Bible in Genesis 30. In Genesis 30, Jacob, his father, has Joseph. And it just essentially says Jacob had a son with his wife Rachel, and they had a son, Joseph. And then 7 more chapters go by, and then we kind of get finally the story of Joseph, the main part of it. And it goes on for several chapters. It's a big narrative in Genesis. And so we're going to start in Genesis 37, verse 2. So if you want to grab a Bible, feel free to do that. We'll have some of it up on the screen as well. And so here's where we start. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them, to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and they couldn't speak peaceably to him. We start off with the account of Jacob. These are the generations of Jacob, or this is the family of Jacob. Now, if you remember, Jacob now gets a new name in Scripture. Do you remember this? Little Bible review for you. Jacob becomes Israel. Gold stars for all of you, just like in high school, right? Jacob becomes Israel. And we could talk about the theological points for that, but what you need to remember that as you read through this, the writer actually flip-flops the name several times. And we don't got tons of time to get into that, but just know if you see Israel, they're talking about Jacob, right? Joseph's father. So Jacob is Israel. Israel is Jacob. Now, Jacob has a father, and his name is Isaac. Okay, and Isaac has a father, and his name is Abraham. Good job, right? And Abraham is the first person that God really comes down to and starts this new covenant with. You remember? He comes down to Abraham and he says, I am going to be your God. You are going to be my people. I'm going to bless you, and through you, you are going to bless all nations. And so then we hear over and over in Scripture, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now we get Joseph that falls in line with this. And so Joseph is the son of Jacob, in this lineage of God's people. And so we find out first that Joseph is 17. He's this young kid. He's younger than all. There's 11 brothers, about 10 of them. He's the 11th. He's the youngest. And he's out in the fields with them shepherding. It says that he's like a boy. He's kind of like the tag along, right? That, oh, take your little brother with you kind of deal. I was the little brother, and so I had a lot of that growing up. But he goes out, and it says then he comes back to his father, and he gives his father a bad report. In Hebrew, if you look up kind of that phrase, it leaves a lot to be desired because people argue what it means. Some would say that he's telling his father evil things that his brothers are doing. Some would say that actually, no, it actually means he's telling his father lies about his brothers. And still others would say it's actually more like tattletaling, right? Like there's just little things that he's nitpicking, that he's tattletaling on his brothers. But anyway you kind of slice that, whatever phrasing maybe you want to go with, the one thing I think is pretty clear. When you tattletale on your brothers, it never goes good, right? Never. You either get beat up or they tell dad or mom everything you did wrong as well, right? Any of you guys have that happen? We sometimes had a little pact. My mom is here, but I think she knows this. We wouldn't tattle on each other. That way, like, you just kind of kept all the secrets and then you couldn't, like, uncork it because then everything would come out. But Joseph goes ahead and he starts telling his dad, whether their stories are true or false, it starts to create this division between him and his brothers. And the writer starts to set that up, that there's this initial division between them. And so there is kind of the setting of the story that there's a division between Joseph and his brothers. Now, I told you that Joseph is the 11th son born. Jacob has already had 10 sons and actually some daughters as well. And he's had them with multiple wives. And so I'm going to give you a little background so you understand maybe why Joseph is the favorite. Jacob's family line, if you read it, is dysfunctional, like at best. If you are feeling bad about your family, you go home today, you read about Jacob, and I guarantee you'll be like, oh, we're not so bad, right? We're okay. Jacob's family is a mess. And it then even is into his marriages, and he ends up marrying this woman named Leah, who is Rachel's older sister, and he gets tricked in the process of this. I'd love to explain it all, but it's not the woman he wanted to marry. And so he ends up having to work longer for his father-in-law to get Rachel. He finally gets Rachel, and then he's also given some maidservants. And so he ends up with like 4 different wives, and they all have sons for him, except for Rachel. He has 10 sons from Leah, and then his 2 other kind of maidservant wives. And Rachel's barren at the time. And finally, she ends up having a son. And it's in Jacob's old age. And so it's the firstborn son from his favorite wife. And it's Joseph. Later, they have Benjamin as well. We'll get into that in later weeks. And so Joseph, now that you kind of understand that, why did he pick Joseph? Well, it's the firstborn of his favorite wife that was born in this old age where maybe we didn't think we would have any more kids, or she wasn't able to. And so Joseph becomes the favorite, the most well-loved. And now this isn't just the most well-loved or the favorite that everybody thinks is the favorite. Do you guys have this in your family where everybody goes, oh, you're mom and dad's favorite, right? Or maybe there's some arguing. And then you ask mom or dad and they go, no, we all love you equally, right? Have you told your kids that? We love you equally. right? I would say that's the good parental response. Jacob doesn't have that. He grabs Joseph, he's the most loved, and he's gonna let everybody know it. And so he gives him this coat of many colors. Doesn't really say many colors. That's kind of an argument, once again, of what that means. It could be this ornate robe that was gold or silver or jewelry on it, something that was special nevertheless, probably long down to your wrist and your ankles. And so he gives this to Joseph, and you actually find Joseph wears this like everywhere he goes. And so the brothers see this. This is a visible sign that their dad loves Joseph more than anyone else. And they hate him. It says like they can't even speak peaceably to him. It's like when you know that you got a problem with somebody and you said, I can't even talk to them right now, right? If I see them, and I'm just gonna, ever have someone like that? This is kind of the saying that Joseph's brothers have. They can't talk to him. They can't stand him. They hate him because he's more loved by his father than any of them. So you sit there as I'm studying this and reading this, and I'm going, okay, seems like his brothers are jerks, right? Is this Joseph's fault? This can't be Joseph's fault that his father loves him more. Like he didn't have a choice in that. As I just started to think about this and kind of roll that over in my mind, I want to give you an application point here. And this kind of really jumped out to me, and maybe I'm just going to tell you what God convicted me of, okay? And so as we go through life, there are often times, for whatever reason, whether God ordained or God allowed, that we are going to find favor in people's eyes. I think probably many of you could agree with this, not all the time, but at certain times in our life, we are going to find favor with people. Maybe that's at work, that you work a job that for some reason you're getting promotions and bonuses and you're finding favor in your job. Maybe it's in your neighborhood or with your relationships, right? That for some reason you are finding favor in people's eyes. People like you. Maybe you are shown forgiveness that often isn't shown, but for some reason, they'll give you maybe the benefit of the doubt. They'll forgive you. And so you get this favoritism in different areas maybe of your lives, this love. And this maybe is, like I said, God ordained, maybe God allowed. But often, at least for my response, this is how I feel. I deserve it, right? Whether I get a job, well, I deserved it. I worked hard. I get a promotion, well, I earned it. My family's favorite, well, of course I am, right? Look at my great personality. But you know what, as I think about that, and as I've gotten maybe a little bit older and met some more people in life, you start to realize that sometimes other people deserve it more than me. That I got a job that maybe someone else had worked harder for. I was shown favor that others weren't afforded. And it was nothing that I did. It was just God letting me have favor in that situation or with that person. Can I give you a comical illustration of this? I do a lot of our grocery shopping. And so, I go to the grocery store, the big one, Kroger's, and get the cart, I start pushing it, and I do the weave up and down every aisle, right? Do you do this? Picking out things that you need. And as I'm going along and I get to aisle 9 and I look down, I see this little old lady all the way at the end. And she's staring up at taco shells that she can't reach. And here's what happens, because it happens every time. I push my cart down there. She stops me. Can you reach up and get the shells? Right, I can't reach them. And so I stop and I smile. Usually it's the toothless smile to people you don't know. You go. And so I reach up and I grab the shells and I give them to her. But sometimes, I'm in a hurry. My kids are hungry. Like, I worked a long day. And so I see aisle 9 and I see her at the end looking up at the shells, and I go to aisle 10. I've never done that, like that often. But what would be worse than that is I go down aisle 9 and I see her, and before she can say anything, I reach up, I grab the shelves that are all the way in the back, and I go, it's so great being tall. Like, I can get the ones in the back that, all the grubby fingers haven't touched yet. And so I take it, put it in my thing, say, oh, this is awesome. See ya, bye. And she's left standing there like, right? It's comical. You would go, oh, Steve, like, you wouldn't do that. Just like help her out. But here's the point. I did nothing to be 6'2". I mean, I ate a lot of food, but I did nothing to be 6'2". I'm just that way. That's how I was created. And I can go through that grocery store, being able to grab every item I need, no problem. I can also go through that grocery store and grab everyone else's item that they need, no problem as well. And when they leave, they can go back. This is how I always imagine, oh, this nice young man helped me get the taco shells, right? But I can end up being a blessing by the things that have been given to me, whether I deserve them or not. Could I ask you a question? Would you think about this for an idea? Have you been shown favoritism? Have you been given things? Have you found favor in people's eyes? And what are you doing that to leverage that for those around you, for the benefit of those around you? Or so often we take and we hoard what we have. We think we deserve it. And I think that if I give it out or help others, it might be taken from me. I think in a world that, if you watch the news, right, is more divided than ever, taking seriously the command to love your neighbor as yourself is needed by Christians. There's so often that areas of our life that God has blessed and shown us favor in that we have not done anything to deserve it, and He's giving that so that we can be a blessing, a benefit to those around us. To go back to Joseph, it's hard to say like what was the attitude that Joseph had, because it really doesn't say, but I do wonder, could he have leveraged that love from his father for the sake of his brothers? Do you ever think about that? I was joking with one of our staff members today. I said it would be like if you got a $10,000 raise. The church should definitely give all their pastors that. But if you get this $10,000 raise or a bonus, and you go, oh, look at what I got, I would be upset or jealous. That I'd be like, oh, why'd you get that? Why didn't I? Now, if you come to me and go, hey, like, I want to help you out, like, give me a little cut of it. Not that you need to do that with your bonuses, but you understand the point, right? How you present it, the humility that you receive favor, blessings, is a big deal. And so I wonder if Joseph could have done that better. We don't know. But what comes next is now this even bigger rift between Joseph and his brothers. And so Genesis 37, we're going to read 5 through 11. Here's what it says. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we are binding sheaves in a field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. Then he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told this to his fathers and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Joseph is already on shaky terms with his brothers. And he comes to them as only I can imagine a 17-year-old would do. And he said, hey, brothers, come here, because I had this dream. Now, you need to know or kind of remember that God spoke in dreams, that God revealed himself to people in dreams, and that especially in that time, a dream would have signified communication with the divine. And so when Joseph says, hey, I have a dream, he's not just saying I have a dream, right? He's saying that God's communicated something to me. And he said, we're all out in the field and we're gathering grain, right? And mine standing upright, nice and tall, and yours all bow down, right? This is not going to go over well. His brothers respond with this, are you going to reign over us? Are you going to rule over us? This is like when I have two little sons and they go, Dad, we're going to beat you up. And I say like, oh, you're going to beat me up, right? This mocking, like, there is no way this is going to happen. And Joseph's brothers respond in this fashion. They're like, you're going to reign over us? You're going to rule over us? And then it continues to say then that they hated him for his dreams. You'll see I'll put up on the screen here, these different ways that his brothers start to hate him. It says first, right, that his brothers saw that the father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him. And then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. And then the last one, right, so they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Can we stop there for a second and kind of look at that idea? Joseph comes. He has two different dreams, one with the sheaves and then another with the stars and the sun and the moon all bowing down to him. And he comes and he presents this to his brothers that already dislike him. And they hate him for the dream. And then it says they hate him even more for the dream and his words. Something about how Joseph is telling his brothers about this dream, this vision that he has for what God has designed him to be, is leaving like a nasty taste in their mouth. It's true that God is designed Joseph different than his brothers, right? He's going to be, if you know the story, ruler over the nations, right? He has this big, bold, huge calling and purpose. But somehow in the way he's now presented this to his family, he has made them hate him. I've had the opportunity over a lot of years in student ministries to talk to students and share with students about God. I've got to take a student who knows nothing about God. I one time had a girl walk in and she listened to a talk and I thought, man, I did such a good job. And then she came and she said, what's an Israelite? Right? She had no concept of God, kind of biblical history, nothing. But I got to walk her through all of that. And seeing her come to faith then is amazing. I had one student, though, one time that was listening and was coming to church from kind of an outside family. His parents, never came to church. And so we walked her through, becoming a Christian. She professed faith, got baptized. And the mom calls me up on the phone one day. And so I'm ready to hear like, Steve, you are so great. You've changed my student's life, right? Like this, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a great phone call, right? So I pick it up, hello. And the mom goes on to tell me, she's very upset. And so I'm not ready for this. And she goes, my daughter's coming home every time from church saying that we're doing everything wrong, we're sinners, and we're going to hell. Like, what? I didn't know what to say. I kind of just mumbled an apology and said I had a meeting and went on. Like, I was shocked because the daughter she was really listening and seeing God for the first time. And I think he was revealing who she was becoming, what he had created her to be. Yet in her immaturity, as she saw some of this and started to come to a broader understanding of God's will for her and for everyone else, how she told that wasn't great, right? It was kind of prideful and mean and arrogant and judgmental. And it definitely wasn't good news, right? Think of what the gospel is supposed to be, right? This is good news for all people. And somehow she was coming to I don't know what happened. We had a long talk about how to talk to your family about your faith and where you're growing and seeing God move because like coming off like that, that wasn't the point. Think of 1 Corinthians. Probably some of you know this passage. But what does it say? 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not loved, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and I understand all the mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, and if I deliver my body up to be burned, but have not loved, I gain nothing. Like as we get to know God's will, as we share with others, maybe the insight into what God has created us to be, what we are becoming, how we do that is really important. It reflects on God. When I go, I set myself up on a platform. Oh, look how great I am. It's not how great God is, it's how great I am. When all I do is tell people about every way that they're sinning and never tell them, hey, there's really good news. Joseph, I would say, at best, wasn't very wise and didn't have a lot of tact in how he was communicating this to his family. I think at worst, some theologians, some scholars would argue he's arrogant, bratty, prideful of what he's saying to his brothers. And it ends up being this major turnoff. Even his father, who loves him, scolds him, right? When he shares about the dream of the sun and the moon and the stars. And the father even retorts, is me and your mother, your brothers, are we all going to bow down to you? But did you catch at the very end? It's kind of my last point for today that I found really fascinating with what he said, right? As he's speaking, he says, is your mother, your brothers, are we all going to bow down to you? But then he says this, and his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept that saying in mind. His brothers were jealous, but his father kept that saying in mind. We find one other time that this phrase is used in Scripture. It's in the New Testament. It's with the story of Joseph and Mary and Jesus. Do you remember this? They go to the temple for Passover. They go to Jerusalem. And as they're worshiping there, right, and the festivities, and then they pack up and they leave and they forget Jesus. Remember this story? They leave Jesus. As a side note for parents, if you ever leave your child and they're complaining, Mom, Dad, you forgot me, you say, Jesus' parents left him. Are you better than Jesus? I guarantee it will work. Okay, it probably won't, but Jesus gets left. And Joseph and Mary are running around trying to figure out where he is. 3 days he's left, and they come back and they find him sitting in the temple. And the people sitting around him are baffled by his wisdom, his ability to ask questions and reason. And so as Mary and Joseph find Jesus, they ask him, what are you doing here? Like, we were so worried about you. And Jesus responds, didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? And it says it leaves everyone confused. They don't know like what he means by this. But it says that Mary kind of does. Luke 2:51, I think we got it for you on the screen. It says, but Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart. It's kind of the same phrase that is used a little different that with Jacob and Joseph, that he's thinking about these, he's pondering them. They're becoming aware that God is doing something unique in this individual. And so while his brothers reject Joseph completely, Jacob starts to think about, maybe I'm getting an insight into what Joseph is going to become, what he is becoming. So the application point for me, for you, are you aware of what God is doing in your life? Are you aware of maybe what you're becoming, maybe what you've become? Are you being faithful to what he has created and intended you to be? Because I think we have the ability, right? We have the ability to be faithful or to rebel and go, I don't like what you've created me to be. I want to be something else. But as I said in the beginning, this works when we are a part of God's story, God's plan for us, not when we try to make God part of my plan, our plan. We leave Joseph in somewhat of this odd place with his brothers. We're not going to get into any more of the story, but we leave him at conflict with his brothers, just starting to get the hint that Joseph is destined for something more than where he's at. And so I would ask you, as you think, as we wrap up, are you listening to what God is talking to you about? Are you able to see what he is having you become? For me, the same question. I was thinking about the verse in Ephesians 2. It says, Ephesians 2:10, for we are his workmanship. Some translation, handiwork. Created in Christ Jesus for good work, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Can I identify the work that God has created for me to walk in? Do you know the work that God has created for you to walk in? Are you being faithful to that? I'd say the number one way you can be faithful is by knowing the Creator, by knowing his will, and then being able to be faithful to that will. I'd love for you to think, as we're going to go into communion in a second, are you being faithful to be a part of what God is doing in your life? Would you pray with me before we take communion? Dear Lord, I don't understand why you let us be a part of all this, but you do. You give us free will. You are the creator. You're sovereign over all of this, and you mold and you shape us. But then you also let us be faithful to that. You let us make a choice and a decision. I pray that this morning that you would give us a clear picture, even as Joseph was starting to get the picture of what you would have from us, what you want us to become. And then give us the courage and the boldness to walk in that and to live that out. In your name, amen.